Hello my guys and girls and everybody, welcome back to Magic Called Shit Show. I'm a baby booktube, but it's awful. There's a similar idea than the DVD graveyard video I did a while ago, but this one has more of a purpose, I guess. With the DVD one, it was kind of like I wanna do a video like the movie collectors do on the YouTubes, because why not? It's kind of fun, I guess. This time I want to try to be one of them epic booktubers, just for fun and to do a little thing for myself, because I used to read a lot of books back in the days, but that kind of stopped like 2-3 years ago, kind of somewhere down there that road. And I've finally, it's August now, it's the 12th of August 2021 now, and I finally got back into reading books regularly again earlier this month. And I used to do these this yearly book reading goals on Goodreads, where you set yourself a goal of reading this amount of books before the end of the year. And I haven't done that for a while now. And now that I've got back into books, I want to do that again. Though, because the year is already halfway over, more than halfway over actually, I'm gonna set my goal of books low for the rest of the year. I set my goal to be 10 books from now till the end of the year, the end of 2021. And I gonna talk about each book that I read, at least each book that I finish. I don't know if I'm gonna talk about unfinished books, or if there are even gonna be any. I usually try to stick with it and actually finish a book, even if I don't like it, but I don't know if I'm still gonna vibe with that mindset these days, because time is valuable and you shouldn't waste it with things that you don't feel you would get any enjoyment or value out of. Anyway, I'm gonna try to make this a thing. Read 10 books from the end of July to the end of the year 2021. If you use any social media sites, like literature social media sites, I am on Goodreads. I've been there for an eternity now. Though right now, as I make this video, I'm actually kind of switching to Storygraph, as many people seem to do, because that's the new hot thing since the beginning of the year or something. And there are a lot of merits to it. One, it's not attached to Amazon. And two, more importantly, it's way more streamlined, it's way cleaner, it's way better to handle, in my opinion. Goodreads hasn't had any substantial upgrades in fucking eternities, and their library system is pretty fucking convoluted and outdated in many aspects, and it can be a huge fucking hassle to fucking organize your own reading over there. And so, like many others, I'm beginning to jump over to Storygraph. As of right now, I'm still using them both parallel to each other, but I might be going purely to Storygraph in the near future, who knows. Also, I'm trying out recently this app called Bookly that you can use to track your reading times and get the stats back. It's just a fun little thing. Record your reading time whenever you read a book, and then when you finish that book, you get a stat screen of everything. How long you've been reading, what's the most pages read in a day or something, how does your reading speed compare to the previous book. It even has predictions after a few reading sessions. It has a prediction of what it thinks you're gonna need to finish the book, how many hours or whatever. In my case, it has been pretty fucking accurate so far, which is kind of cool. But it's just kind of a fun thing if you like statistics and shit. Okay, so that's, I guess, the long ass shitty fucking boring introduction to what this whole video is gonna be. Maybe a series, maybe I'm gonna make it a monthly video vlog thing. Now I'm gonna talk about the books I've read already so far, since I got back into reading and began that reading challenge that I set for myself. Alright, so the first book is The King in Yellow by Robert W. Chambers, which is a classic short story collection. It has literary value, like historical value a little bit, because I guess mainly because H.P. Lovecraft, the famous author of tentacly space horrors, he was hugely inspired by this and incorporated parts of this short story book into his own Cthulhu mythos, which is kind of the way it's mostly known today, I believe. Like, The King in Yellow is for most people a Lovecraft term, but this is the original source of where this concept comes from. This short story by Robert W. Chambers is a collection of short stories where a couple of them have mentions of a cursed play that, bluntly said, turns the reader insane. And that spreads over to a few of those short stories. Other of these stories are not related at all. And in some of the stories it's just like a mention, like the character sees the cursed play King in Yellow in the bookshelf and wonders, that's a curious one, and then goes on his own adventure, and it's never like a thing in its story. But some stories have more of a focus on this play actually, and it becomes more of a plot relevant item. It's fine. I wasn't blown away by this at all. I mean, first of all, I'm glad I read this. I bought this months ago, and it was reminded of the Lovecraft connection, and was like, yeah, what the fuck actually is The King of Yellow? Maybe I should look that up. I ordered this book, and then it was just lying around. I didn't read it for like 4 months or something, and now I finally read it. That was my first book of the year. The first book in general I finished in 1.5 years probably. I think that's the exact time. It has a few very good stories. It has a few really atmospheric moments with great writing and some really nice grim ideas. There are also wild cards in this. There's one particular chapter or one particular short story that's just called The Prophet's Paradise, and it's not even a story, it's just a few random fever dream lines of text that are completely surreal and hard to read. Like, you could read anything in them. They are very, very enigmatic, to say the least, but they're interesting, I guess. But none of the other stories have that wild style of writing. And then there's also the foreword of this mentions that the author Chambers very quickly settled in the writing of romance novels for his main money making. Like, apparently most of his bibliography is romance novels, and this is one of his early rare forays into like horror or mystery. And it's very easy to believe, because romance is a pretty prominent subject matter in pretty much every single short story, and they become cheesy as fuck a lot, which works sometimes but can be grating others. There's even, in the later section of the book, there are two stories that don't have anything to do with horror or mystery at all. It's just straight up romance, and those two are so extremely similar to each other that people are speculating that one of them was just a filler story that he flushed out to make the book a little bit thicker, and then I would believe that. Also, the most interesting thing to me about this, or funny, like, you can make a drinking game reading this. Every time the author uses the word rose or rosy, and that goes both either as the flower, the color, or just to rise in the past form. That word is in here so fucking much, and especially he loves to call things rose colored or rosy. Like that, he is. It's almost like he's obsessed with that. That it happens in every fucking chapter. Something is rose colored. Yeah, it's an okay read. It has some highlights, but it definitely gets less interesting the further you get in the back of this book, because it becomes more romancy the further you get in, and it becomes more repetitive the further you get in, and the actual like connections of the King in Yellow concept with the cursed play, they are all in the like first half of this, and after that it's just done. It's an interesting read. I enjoyed it, but it's not like great. I wouldn't say, yo, you gotta read this is gonna blow your mind. It's not. It's just fine for the most part. The second book I cannot show on camera because it's not here anymore. The second book I read is Autodiebe by Heiner. That's German for car thieves. It's a German book, and I don't have it anymore because I already threw it in the recycling bin. This book must have been the filthiest, most disgusting, like falling apart book I've had on my shelf, and I don't even know why or when I got it. I just know it's been on my shelf for forever. I know that there have been moments in the past where I had it in my hand and thought, dude, okay, maybe I should just throw it out. This thing is filthy. I want to wash my hands after I touched it, but I never did. And so recently I just thought, alright, you kept this fucking thing in your possession so fucking long, you might as well read it. It's not long anyway, it's like 160 pages. Just read it, get the mystery out of your shelf, and throw it out, because that thing was done. It was a little fun journey too, to like investigate this book, because I had no idea where this came from. It was printed in 1960, while Germany was separated in East and West Germany. During that time, there was a lottery system where people could collect their receipts for lottery tickets that they didn't win with, and exchange a certain number of these receipts for a book of their choice, I guess, out of a limited pool of titles, and this one was one of those. So somebody in the 1960s traded in their lottery receipts for this book, and then I'm assuming it was like lying around in a moldy ass disgusting basement for the last 60 years, and somehow it like ended up on my shelf. The book itself, it's a crime novel. It's a pretty short crime novel about a cop investigating the murder of his cop partner in Berlin during the 1960s, and crossing the way of a underground car thief trading circle. That's it. It's a pretty light read, it's a pretty swift read. It was pretty good, it was pretty alright, pretty decent. I don't really have any complaints, but definitely nothing amazing, and nothing that needs to be preserved when it's already in this state of filth. Like, I might sound a little bit dramatic, but I'm not even joking. Every time I read this, after each reading session, I had to wash my fingers because they were like dusty and grimy. That thing wasn't good anymore. And so once I finished it, once I read the last page, I closed it and threw it immediately in the paper recycling. It's gone. Anyway, that's the story of Autodiebe by Heiner. And then the third and final book for now that I've read, the most recent book I read. I just finished it 2 days ago. This is Alan Cumming's Not My Father's Son. It's a memoir written by the actor Alan Cumming that I've also bought like 2 years ago. I finally read it and I'm actually very glad I did. This was better than I expected. Alan Cumming is an actor that I always liked seeing when he popped up in any movies. He did star in a few like big budget Hollywood movies like X-Men 2, Son of the Mask, the masterpiece, and some others that I can't fucking find out right now. But he's like more of a smaller like character actor usually, or in like more lesser known movies. But he's not primarily a movie actor. He does a lot of stage things too. He does musical shit too. He's a singer as well. So I knew him as a movie actor, but I got interested in reading up a bit about him at some point in the past, a few years ago. And so I bought this book. This is the memoir. It's the first memoir he wrote. He's actually releasing his second memoir this year, like in a few months or something, which sounds interesting as well. This one deals with two things. It deals one with content warning, child abuse, domestic abuse, trauma therapy, all of that stuff. But it's a hopeful, it's a positive one. It has a good ending after all. It all is done. It's all in a good place now. And this is just a retelling and the process of it. He recalls his childhood under his very violent and abusive father, trying to make sense of it and how that shaped him in his adult world. And at the same time, he participates in the filming of a documentary where they investigate one of his estranged ancestors, and those two storylines intertwine to make a whole about belonging, our feel of a family, and relationships in our family, and of course very, very big focus on overcoming trauma and living with it. But it's structured so well. It doesn't feel repetitive at all. There's so much variety just through jumping through these two storylines, pretty much. Like his past as a child, and the then present, investigating one of his own ancestors. And they are both very interesting stories, and there are very, very interesting connections between them that one wouldn't necessarily expect. And it did actually have one or two somewhat shocking, definitely entertaining twists and turns, so to say. During the last 150 pages or so, I was actually kind of glued to this because I really wanted to know how both these storylines end, kind of. What the final fucking situation is, the result of all of this, all of these experiences. And it delivered on being interesting, thought-provoking, and satisfying in a storytelling sense even, which is not something I expected from this. Hell, I wasn't sure what to expect from this at all. I only knew that this was gonna be him talking about overcoming child abuse. I think that's the only concrete context I knew about this book. I didn't know about the rest of it, and there's a surprising amount of other things that all kind of tie in to the grand name, the grand subject. So I actually do wholeheartedly recommend this, not only to people who know Alan Cumming and like him in other things. I don't know how widespread that even is. I mean, he's not a superstar. He's a name and a face that people recognize, but he's not a superstar, right? But even aside from that, one, if you like reading memoirs or biographies of people in show business in general, this is one of the good ones. I read a few now because that's kind of a subgenre I really like, and this is one of the better, or one of the most interesting ones, probably. even aside from that, I do really recommend this to people who are interested in stories about overcoming past trauma or specifically child abuse, because this does a good job of bringing that across the page in an insightful way. It's also just an interesting read about finding your place in the world, in a way, I guess identifying your true family, kind of, and what family means, or father figures in general, what they actually mean to us or can mean. It is a very interesting book. I do recommend this. So yeah, that's the 3 books I read so far. 3 down, 7 left. So far it has gone very well. I've read at least 30 minutes every day since the beginning of the month now. Right now I'm reading Girl Interrupted, the German translation though, because I borrowed this from a friend. Alrighty. Hello, welcome back. What's up? It's the next day, and after I filmed the video part yesterday, I went back to read and finished the book. I finished Girl Interrupted, yeah, right here, the German translation. And then pretty much immediately afterwards, I rewatched the movie as well to refresh my memory on that and really like being able to tell the comparisons, differences, the similarities between those 2 versions. I wasn't a huge fan of this book. The way it was structured in random pieces of memories and vignettes, many of which seemed kinda mundane, and many of which were more focused on not as interesting characters and less on the actual experience with mental illness and therapy. Engaged very much. It wasn't intrigued very much. It didn't say that many unique or original things about one's experience with therapy and mental illness that I wanted and expected from this, I guess. I mean, in a way, everybody's experience with these things are their own thing, and this is a recollection of real life occurrences, so I cannot like fault this for not being thrilling, I guess. It's not a story that was created to entertain, but still I didn't enjoy how it was structured. I didn't enjoy much of how it was told, I guess. And it wasn't as reflective as I hoped it would be. The most reflective parts about this book are the beginning and end. Pretty much clearly that. Especially the ending had actually like the most interesting parts of the book for me. Mainly like in the post clinic stay, like afterwards or epilogue, so to say, because that's when the author Susanna Kaysen actually delves properly for the first time into her official diagnosis and what that diagnosis of borderline personality disorder brings with it, including like stigmas and shit. And she breaks the individual defining attributes, at least at the time, for that condition down and tries to readjust them to herself. And that was kind of the most interesting part for me, and possibly the most memorable part for me too. In terms of the actual like clinic stay vignettes, there wasn't too much that would stick with me, you know. I can confirm now that for me this is honestly one of the rare occasions where the movie adaptation is better than the book, but that is also because book and movies are very different. While this is a very chopped up, like kind of diary of real life events, the movie completely rearranges those elements, adds completely new ones to properly tell an actual like dramatic story with a clear thread through it all, with like a free act structure and everything. This book doesn't have that, obviously. So to me, the movie actually is more successful in one, being entertaining, even though that's not the number one intent of this book. I call it a win for the movie to be successfully more entertaining, but also to, in my opinion, the movie, through the dramatic staging of the story, manages to be more reflective and have a bit more depth than the blunt true story, I guess, gives away. I think it's all in the way it's presented. Because obviously there's merit in a real life story of somebody going through therapy for the first time while they are very young in the 60s. There's definitely interesting parts about this, but I'm just not a fan of how this was presented, I guess. And the movie transforms the source material completely in almost being a completely independent thing with only a few details that overlap, and as a piece of media it is more successful in my opinion. Still, I probably sound harsher than I mean to be. This isn't a terrible book. This still has value, this still has interesting moments, it still has interesting facets of the meaning of mental illness, the meaning of stigma, the fucking patient and therapist relationship, as well as the blurred lines between mental illness and developing character. That's a theme as well. I just don't think this particular book goes as deep or as satisfying into these themes as many other stories of its kind. What is it? Ned Vizzini? I think that's the author. Vizzini's It's kind of a funny story, which is also based on his real life experiences being a young adult in a psychiatric clinic, dealing with depression for the most part. And that one is more in a structured, dramatic story form. And in my opinion, it's more successful in both engaging the viewer as well as exploring the individual elements of that subject and setting. That's Girl Interrupted. Still glad I read it. I finished the next book, Roadside Picnic by Arkady and Boris Strugatsky. It's a Russian classic in the sci-fi genre, I would say, from what I gathered. This is not a book I would have picked out myself, most likely. I've heard of the authors before, but this book hasn't been on my radar at any point. This was a spontaneous read as part of a online book club thing that some people are doing that I know online, and I just said spontaneously, yeah, sure, let me pick that up too. And it's a pretty good sci-fi read. I enjoyed it for the most part. It had some very, very good moments, but also some more lackluster elements in my opinion. But the good moments overshadowed the weaker parts in my opinion. This is set in a world where Earth was visited by aliens. Those aliens aren't there anymore, but they left behind a bunch of space trash. And there's a whole society that developed where people would try to scavenge those so-called zones for alien trash and sell it on the black markets. But those zones are dangerous as fuck, with really strange dangers that humans don't understand yet. And this mostly focuses on one of the people who make a living out of getting shit from those zones. Though, still with that premise, not as much of this book actually takes place inside of those dangerous zones as I expected to. There is a lot of story that happens outside of the zones and explores a bit the society that built around those alien visits and how that shaped Earth. There's a whole fucking chapter, which probably is my favorite chapter, where most of the chapter is literally just two people talking about what the fuck the meaning of the visit by the aliens could be. Never actually coming to a conclusion, just throwing around theories and ideas and hypotheses. And that was written so well though, and was such a fun exploration into this previously set up world, that it probably was my favorite chapter. It's chapter 3 out of 4. The stuff that actually is set in the zones is interesting at first, but it takes a while until it actually explores the many details that it hints at. There's a lot that's mentioned here without actually being explained or really looked at, and it can feel kind of dissatisfying at first. Like, it's intriguing, but you keep wanting more. Like, it's only just scratching the surface of this world. Later in the book, the final chapter, chapter 4, which is actually completely set in one of those zones during a scavenger mission, that finally has some proper interaction with different perils of the zone in a more detailed manner. That was I'm glad that was here, because up until the 4th chapter I wasn't sure if we would actually get this, because until that point it was so kind of vague in a lot of aspects. For the most part, it's still a very well written book and it flows pretty well. Sometimes it goes a little bit too haywire or too abruptly into madness for my taste. It didn't deter from the enjoyment overall too much. The actual ending of this is not my cup of tea either. It's kinda anticlimactic, but there was still enough before that I enjoyed that I'm fine with it. So I can definitely see why this is a classic science fiction book. This was written in the 70s, and it's this was an interesting look into something that I had no prior attachment to and probably wouldn't actually have read beforehand. But so even though I wouldn't call this a complete and utter masterpiece, there were definitely long parts in this that I really enjoyed. So yeah, that was a good one. That was pretty nice. So, I finished another book. I finished the Ring 3 Loop by Koji Suzuki, which, I mean, if you probably heard of the Ring movies, the American ones or the Japanese original movies. This is the 3rd book in the series of novels those movies are based on. Though I don't think this is the finale of the original trilogy. There were more books that came after this. But the original trilogy was supposed to end with this. And from what I know, none of what's in here ever made it to any of the movie adaptations ever. If you've seen all the movies, you don't know what this is about. And that's probably mainly because this one is going into a really different direction than most of these books. So I read the previous 2 books years ago and I loved them. Especially the first one is one of my favorite books of all time, the original Ring by Koji Suzuki. And this 3rd book though, I had read parts of this years ago, but I hadn't finished it. So I finally did that this week. Started from the beginning fresh and went through it in a few days. And like, I'm a huge Ring fan. I think I showed this in a different video. I probably mentioned it in different videos before. I have like a whole like part of my shelf with like the Ring shit, like the movies and the books behind there too, or most of the books. So I'm a fan of this franchise. This third one started out pretty solidly for me. The way it set up the new characters was fine, was nice. They are decently interesting. I liked the exposition and the like kind of world building. Right from the beginning, there were parts of like medical and technological subjects, like that were not just surface level, but like the medical and technological subjects or themes were always a thing in these Ring books. That's always a big part of them. And obviously that's in here too. Though the further this gets to the like final act, to the final 100 pages or so, the main big technological idea that this book in the series tends to focus on is not one that I like. I respect it in how like kind of high concept it is, and that it's a like, I did not expect this kind of thing to turn up in a Ring novel at all. So I guess it was an unexpected surprise. I guess that means something, and I respect it for that in a way, but it wasn't what I wanted, I guess. And I don't, for one, I don't think it was done in a thorough enough way that it was convincing. I wasn't able to like immerse myself in this one as I was in the previous two ones. And two, the concept that's established here retcons the previous two novels in a pretty fucking significant way that again is kind of interesting in how ambitious it is, but I don't think it does it anything good. Like I don't think it does this franchise anything well. I don't know about that. Also, this book wasn't... Yeah, now that I think of it, in hindsight, this book had barely any actual horror elements in it, which the previous two like heavily base on. There are some drastic situations, there are some gruesome little moments, but this is more like a science fiction novel than anything else. I think you could even categorize this as a YA novel. But yeah, like I didn't hate it. It's still fine in my eyes. I still like gave it like, on Bookly I gave it like 3 out of 5 because they don't do half stars, but in reality I would probably give this like 2.5 out of 5 or like 2.75 out of 5, something like that. It's fine, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it is the first Ring novel I didn't love and the first Ring novel I wouldn't recommend. If you like, if I had a friend who went through the first 2 books and liked them a lot, I would still say you don't need this one. It's fine. You can skip this one. So yeah, that's that. And then also like a little bit of a tiny thing that I read in between while I was reading this too. This small little thing right here that I don't have physically. I couldn't get this physically if I wanted to. This is Drop, also written by Koji Suzuki. This is kind of a gimmick thing. This is a short story that was originally printed and publicized on toilet paper in Japan, and like nowadays you can get it as a translated ebook on Japanese Amazon, I guess. And yeah, I just saw this in this bibliography on Wikipedia and just had to find out what it is. So I read it. It's fine. Again, it's short as fuck. It's set in a toilet stall. It has a decent atmosphere. It has a decent concept to go off of, but it's nothing great. You know, it's just a little tidbit, I guess, to fill your need if you're like a Koji Suzuki completionist or something. I guess this was printed on toilet paper, and so you were supposed to actually read it while you drop a deuce in a toilet. Ideally in a public toilet, I guess, but obviously that I can't I can't do that. Well, I could do that, but that's not how I experienced this book or the short story. And I'm sure actually being like in that real life situation adds a little bit to the story, since the story is set in a public toilet stall, but again, it's nothing amazing, it's fine, it's neat, it's decent, but definitely not like something groundbreaking, aside from the way it was published, I guess. That was technically 2 more books for the challenge. I think I have 3 books left to accomplish my goal of 10 titles. I set that goal carefully because I didn't know if I didn't expect to burn through books this fast in this month alone. You know? But yeah, here we are. I think it's safe to say that I will reach those 10 books until the end of the year.